The Chinese economy is sick. Everything that can go wrong is going wrong. Growth has slumped, millions are unemployed, investment is sluggish, and local governments are saddled with debt. These are symptoms of a chronic disease. Experts have a name for it. They're calling it an economic long COVID. An economic long COVID. It's a telling assessment, and our lead story tonight, we start with the latest data on trade. China's exports have dropped. It's the biggest drop in 3 years. Exports have fallen by 14.5% compared to the numbers from July 2022. And this is extremely worrying for Beijing because exports are the growth drivers of China. Exports propel their economy. They made China an economic powerhouse, and now they have slumped. What's worse, this is not a one-off. In the past 3 months, China's exports have steadily declined. In the past 7 months, exports have dropped by 5%. Why do you think that's happening? Why are China's exports shrinking? The world wants to decouple with China. They want to reduce dependence on China. But this drop in exports is not because of that. It has nothing to do with decoupling. The problem here is more fundamental in nature. There is a serious drop in demand. The global economy is slowing down. The cost of living is rising. High inflation is hurting everyone. So the general approach is to save money. People all over the world are buying less. And that means fewer orders for Chinese factories. For 4 straight months now, factory activity has been shrinking in China. The workers have fewer orders to process. Factories are churning out fewer goods. China's biggest buyers are placing smaller orders. The United States, for instance, it is a big market for China. But Chinese exports to America fell by more than 23% this year. The European Union is another major buyer. Their orders to China fell by over 20%. And this is the general trajectory. And it's throwing Beijing off balance. 2023 was supposed to be the year of recovery for them. And China was banking on exports to drive this recovery, but that's not happening anymore. And that's not the only problem. There is another vulnerability. China's import orders are also falling. Let me take you back to the latest trade data. There is a fall of more than 12% in imports. A 12% fall in imports. Why is this important? Because import numbers are a reflection of China's economic health. They reveal the inside story. They show the level of consumer demand. Are people in China spending money? These numbers show they're not. A fall in imports signals a dip in spending. Beijing knows that. In the month of July, they introduced a new plan. It was supposed to boost spending. Local officials were asked to reach out to the masses and do what? Encourage residents to refurbish their homes. They had plans to provide better credit facilities. This was supposed to boost spending in household items. But it hasn't really helped. People are not spending as much money as the state would like them to. They're keeping their savings in banks. Look at some numbers from the month of January. This is an assessment on Chinese banks on their liquidity. How much cash do they have in deposits? Trillions of dollars. Deposits were higher than loans. The gap between loans and deposits was at its highest since 1997. And this is a telling statistic. It reveals 2 things. One, the people are worried. They're keeping their savings in banks. They feel they'll have to dip into those savings at some point. The second takeaway is about the banks themselves. They have large deposits. They would like to give out loans to people, but people don't want to take any more loans. Chinese households already have a high level of debt. They're already heavily indebted. By June, they owed more than $5 trillion in debt. This was in the form of mortgage loans, consumer goods loans, credit card debt, private borrowings, business loans. $5 trillion. So households don't have the appetite for more debt, and that's bad business for banks. What is Beijing doing about these issues? They're re-educating their bankers, not in economics or banking, but in the Xi Jinping thought. You heard that right? Instead of fixing this economic mess, Chinese officials are hosting lectures. They're teaching bankers about the Xi Jinping thought. And what is that? It's a set of policies and ideas espoused by the Chinese president. In 2018, these were added to the Chinese constitution. So bankers are being lectured on ideology, on how to be loyal to the Communist Party and to the president. What they need right now is policy intervention, not propaganda. 2 engines of their economy have failed. Exports are down, imports have fallen. Throwing the red book at this problem will not help. Tensions are also rising in the Gulf. The United States has deployed soldiers to the region, around 3,000 soldiers to be precise. They arrived on board 2 warships on Sunday, the USS Bataan and the USS Carter Hall. One is an amphibious assault ship, the other is used for dock landing. Both vessels sailed into the Red Sea on Sunday. But what are they doing there? Countering Iranian aggression. Iran has been capturing oil tankers in the Gulf. How many? Around 20 in the last 2 years, according to Washington. So the US and its allies are worried. Oil prices are already high. The last thing they want is a tanker seizure. So what did Joe Biden do? He flexed his military muscles. He sent thousands of soldiers and multiple fighter jets to the region. Reports say the plan is to escort commercial tankers. How does that work? You deploy US Marines or soldiers on these ships. You raise the stakes for Iran. If they seize or attack these tankers, they could hurt American troops or worse, kill them. So the hope is that the escort will deter Tehran. And what is Tehran saying? Their foreign minister says the deployment is unnecessary and the Gulf nations can protect themselves.
The US military presence in the region has never been meant for maintaining security. Instead, their aim has always been to exacerbate insecurity and instability. Therefore, Iran's position is very clear. We believe in Gulf countries' ability to provide security for themselves and to design a collective security pattern without the presence of foreign troops.
Iran is not backing down. In fact, they're expanding their arsenal. The Iranian Navy has been equipped with a new missile. It's called the Abu Mahdi. It has a range of 1,000 kilometers. The latest showdown has massive implications, both for the US and for the rest of the world. The region we are talking about is this, the Strait of Hormuz. It is 39 kilometers long. It is a choke point between the Gulf of Oman and the Persian Gulf. And why is it important? Because 20% of the world's oil passes through this strait. 20%. If there is fighting in Hormuz, all of us will feel the pinch. Iran knows this. They capture oil tankers for 2 reasons. One is tit for tat. The US often captures tankers containing sanctioned Iranian oil. When that happens, Tehran responds. The second reason is to put political pressure. We know how important oil prices are. Iran weaponizes this to gain concessions. They're doing that. Are they doing that now is the question. It's certainly a possibility. There was talk of an intermediate nuclear deal between Iran and the US. Maybe Tehran is angling for better terms. And if they are, it is the perfect time to do this. America's attention and resources are spread thin. They have a war in Eastern Europe. You have China knocking on Taiwan's doors. So Joe Biden has a lot on his plate. Plus, the American public is tired of West Asian wars. The US military largely pulled out of the region under Donald Trump. Their last carrier left West Asia in November 2020. The last Marine unit was pulled out in 2021. So it was the right time to test Biden's resolve. Would he re-enter the region or not? Well, this time he's decided to order massive deployments. It's definitely a signal of intent. You don't deploy 3,000 soldiers and fighter jets if you're half-hearted. Just one question though. Why? Biden has a re-election next year. Why would he risk being dragged into West Asia again? Reports say his allies want him to do this. Saudi Arabia and the UAE have been cozying up to China. Biden needs to offer them something that China cannot, and that something is security. Safe passage for oil tankers. And where does that leave West Asia? In a more tense situation, certainly. The more deployments you have, the higher the risk of conflict. That's what happened in the 1980s, remember? Iran and the US were engaged in a tanker war. In 1988, the US attacked Iranian oil rigs. They also sank multiple ships. It was the largest US naval battle since the Second World War. My point is very simple. Risks are higher, but China and Russia will be enjoying this. More attention in West Asia means less attention in the Pacific or in Eastern Europe. It's something Joe Biden should be wary of. This is a place where starting a war is pretty easy, but ending one is nearly impossible. He's put thousands of soldiers and weapons in an old flashpoint. What he does next will be crucial. And now let's move from sound military strategies to absolutely absurd ones. The Taliban are amassing troops at the Afghanistan-Iran border. This comes amid heightened tensions between the two nations. The cause is a water dispute. The unusually high temperatures caused by global warming have led to water issues in both these countries, Afghanistan and Iran, and they're quarreling over water sharing. The countries have already traded barbs, even seen a few border skirmishes, but now things seem to be escalating. The Taliban have sent thousands of fighters to the border, and reports say there are hundreds of suicide bombers with them. Yes, suicide bombers. Clearly, old habits die hard. But seriously, what are the warlords in Kabul thinking? A water dispute requires negotiation and diplomacy to solve, not suicide vests. How can they expect to be taken seriously if their go-to strategy is to blow up both sides? Our next report brings you more details.
The Taliban are at it again, preparing their suicide bombers for a mission. But this mission is a bit unusual. It isn't just about causing terror. It's also about resolving a water dispute. Yes, all of us in the rest of the world must have got it backwards. We resolve water disputes by sending our diplomats to the field. We spend years chalking out water treaties, making sure all parties sit at the table and work out a deal that benefits everyone. It seems the Taliban would rather just blow up the negotiating table and their fighters along with it. Welcome to the wild world of suicide bomber diplomacy. Let's first look at how we got here. This is the Afghanistan-Iran border region. This river passes through it. It's called the Helmand in Afghanistan and the Hirmand in Iran. It comes from the Hindu Kush mountains in Afghanistan and supplies water to the Sistan and Balochistan regions of Iran. These are drought-prone areas that depend on the river's water. But Iran says it hasn't been getting its fair share. It accuses Afghanistan of hoarding the river's waters, and tensions have been high because of this water dispute. Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi was in Sistan and Balochistan in May. He threatened the Taliban with retribution if water wasn't shared as previously agreed. Tehran demands that the Taliban respect a water-sharing treaty from 1973. The treaty guarantees Iran a share of the river's water, and it says this year it has only received 4% of the promised amount. That's why Iran is furious. The Taliban say that the treaty doesn't apply during drought years, which is true. The treaty only guarantees water during a normal water year. It's an old treaty. Normal is an ambiguous term. The logical thing to do would be to send negotiators to iron out a clearer deal. But, as you know, logic isn't the Taliban's strong suit. When Raisi made his statement, the Taliban mocked him. A prominent Taliban official offered a gift of a 20-litre water container in response and told Raisi to stop issuing ultimatums. The Taliban said that Iran is causing regional instability by making threats. This obviously didn't go down well with the Iranians. A week after this happened, a border skirmish took place. 2 Iranian guards and 1 Taliban member died. All this happened between mid-May and June. While all this empty bravado was on display, there was some proper diplomacy taking place as well. Afghanistan had completed a dam on the Helmand River in 2021. There's a water reservoir behind it, not too far from the border with Iran. In June, the Taliban had agreed to let an Iranian technical team visit the dam. Then, in early July, Iran said there had been no progress. Then late last month, Iran's Ministry of Foreign Affairs made another statement. It said it had reached a preliminary agreement with the Taliban on water sharing, but it didn't give any details. And now we have troops gathering at the border, which begs the question, what is going on? Water sharing is complex, but it doesn't call for war. And it certainly doesn't call for suicide bombers at the borders. Are the bombers a pressure tactic by the Taliban? A way to strong-arm Tehran into agreeing to whatever has been discussed? Or is it just that the Taliban know no other way? This is a violent insurgent movement that has been fighting for decades. And now that they've taken over, they need to govern. But of course, the Taliban are better at gunslinging than governance. In the case of this water dispute, it seems the Taliban prefer death by suicide bomb to diplomacy, which only goes to show the warlords in Kabul are in over their heads.
Now let's tell you about an old mystery that is back in the headlines. It is called the Havana Syndrome. We live in a world full of mysterious phenomena, the Bermuda Triangle, the Loch Ness Monster. They capture the public imagination, but nothing beats the Havana Syndrome. It has diplomatic intrigue and a dash of paranoia. And what exactly is it? Well, the term Havana Syndrome was first coined in 2016. Havana as in the capital of Cuba. The first case was detected there, hence the Havana Syndrome. It was used to describe a series of unexplained health incidents. They started at the American Embassy in Cuba. Now, the symptoms are no laughing matter, even though they sound like a classic hangover: headache, dizziness, and some cognitive issues. The embassy staff said they heard strange sounds. They experienced weird sensations, all while sitting in their hotel rooms. And how did it happen? Well, that is the big mystery. No one knows. Since 2016, there have been 200 cases of the Havana Syndrome. 200 cases. It has been reported in Australia, Colombia, Russia, Georgia, Kyrgyzstan, Poland, Serbia, Taiwan, China, Uzbekistan, even here in India. In 2021, the US Vice President Kamala Harris was visiting Vietnam. She was about to fly to Hanoi, but her flight got delayed. Do you know why? Because an American official in Vietnam reported the symptoms. So basically, it has been detected all over the world. If you watch sci-fi movies, you may have noticed how aliens only attack America. This is diplomacy's version of it. The Havana Syndrome only affects US diplomats and their families. No one else is harmed. So obviously, there's a lot of questions around it. Is it a genuine health concern, or is it just overthinking fueled by spy movies? Either way, the Havana Syndrome has the world in its grips, and now India is set to investigate it. It began with a petition in the Karnataka High Court. The petition was filed by a Bengaluru resident. It called for an inquiry into the syndrome in India. And the central government has responded to this. They have, in fact, agreed to investigate the matter. And here's something you must know. Till date, India has seen only one case of the Havana Syndrome. It was in 2021. The victim, again, was a US officer in New Delhi. He was part of CI Director William Burns' delegation. He's said to have experienced some weird symptoms, like the ones I described earlier. The officer even had to get some medical treatment, so it must have been serious. But the real intrigue lies in the alleged cause. Since the Havana Syndrome is only affecting US personnel, Washington jumped into action quickly. It looked at all the probable causes: secret weapons, psychological illness, nerve agents, enemy states. They explored all of it. At one point, this was a national security priority for the US. They blamed foreign powers. But soon that theory fizzled out. Do you know why? Because they had no evidence. It's been 7 years. They still have no evidence. The truth is still not out. The closest the US has come to an answer is microwave radiation. And even then, there is no evidence to back it. It almost sounds like a sci-fi movie where villains harness the power of sound to attack unsuspecting diplomats. Forget laser beams and invisible cars. The true weapon is the humble sound. And while we can make jokes about it, for the CIA, the Havana Syndrome is a very serious matter. They may not have found a reason yet, but it's not stopped them from compensating the victims. In 2021, US lawmakers passed a legislation. It was aimed at supporting victims of the syndrome. President Biden signed it into law the very same year. It's called the Havana Act in short, but the full form is a mouthful, and I will read it out for you. This is what it's called: the Helping American Victims Afflicted by Neurological Attacks Act, aka the Havana Act. Clearly, America spent more time on coining the acronym than probing the cause, but each victim with confirmed injuries is eligible to get, and listen to this, $180,000. It's a lot of money, especially for something that cannot even be proven. Now, India wants to investigate it and wants to find out more about this mysterious ailment. Is this an ailment really, or a case of cloak and dagger espionage? We say good luck. We also say reality is sometimes stranger than fiction. And before I begin my last story, let me ask you, have you ever gotten food poisoning? What about a skin infection or bacterial pneumonia? And trust me, this is not an uncomfortable doctor's appointment. I'm simply mentioning commonly occurring bacterial infections. Chances are you've caught one at least once in your life. And what happened next? If a standard drill was followed, doctors probably prescribed antibiotics. After all, antibiotics are life-saving drugs. But what if I told you soon these drugs could stop working? They won't help. Some doctors say it's almost inevitable. And there's a surprising reason why. It's the air you breathe. Polluted air is raising antibiotic resistance among people, no matter their age, no matter where they live. A new global study is out. It recorded data from 166 countries. It says antibiotics are under threat due to air pollution across the world. More germs, like bacteria, are winning the fight. They're defeating the medicines designed to kill them. So antibiotic resistance is on the rise, meaning a wide range of new problems. Infections could go untreated. Even minor injuries could become life-threatening. Many surgeries will not happen because antibiotics may not be able to prevent later infections. The quality of air has always been linked to antibiotic resistance, in fact. It wasn't a cause for alarm, though. People usually resist antibiotics due to misuse or overuse. But now air pollution is getting worse, thanks to road traffic, industrial fumes, coal, wood burning, you name it. So the link between antibiotic resistance and poor air is growing stronger. With every 10% rise in air pollution, antibiotic resistance grows by 1%. It doesn't sound like much, but it is a big problem. It's one of the fastest growing threats to global health. It already affects 7 billion people. It kills more than 1 million people every year. They don't respond to antibiotics, 1 million people every year. If the air quality does not improve by 2050, about 10 million people will die annually. And apart from the human cost, there's going to be an economic cost. Costs could rise sharply, prices would rise sharply due to antibiotic-resistant infections. More and more people would live with untreated infections, and this will hurt poorer nations more. North Africa, West and South Asia face the biggest threats. And this is over and above the harm that toxic air is already causing.
You feel like you're choking when you take the face mask off. Something bad feels in the air.
The air quality has significantly deteriorated in the last several years. I wish as few children as possible would use inhalers. I have been using one for years now, and each time I come to Serbia, my condition gets even worse.
Air pollution is the single largest environmental risk to public health. Again, some have it worse off than others. The Indian capital of Delhi is the most polluted city in the world. Living here reduces your lifespan by 10 years. Some other most polluted cities are in Nigeria, Peru, Bangladesh, Indonesia and Pakistan. But air pollution is a worldwide problem. For every 1,000 people alive on earth, 973 are regularly inhaling toxins. The science and evidence are clear. Air pollution causes heart disease, asthma, lung cancer, even disability and death. And it can be very harmful even for babies. Look at this data. Pollution causes premature birth of 6 million babies every year. It leads to 3 million underweight babies and 1 million stillbirths. Also the death of 500,000 newborns. The numbers are devastating. This is what toxic air is doing to our world. It harms us, the babies that are not even born yet. And now it is rendering our medicines useless. It is the breath of death. It follows us everywhere we go. There is no hiding. So about time we stopped running and try to tackle this problem. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. The Indian Space Research Organisation, or ISRO, has released images of the moon captured by Chandrayaan-3. In Australia, a space object lit up the sky above Melbourne. The Australian Space Agency said it is a remnant of a Russian Soyuz 2 rocket re-entering the Earth's atmosphere. And people usually keep dogs to chase away burglars. But what happens when the dog is irresistibly cute? A burglar in the United States faced a similar situation. He paused the burglary to sneak in a cuddle session. You have to see what happened next. And finally, what makes the 8th of August significant? On this day in 1942, the father of India, Mahatma Gandhi, launched the Quit India movement. It was a civil disobedience movement aimed to end the British rule in India. The British resorted to violent means to thwart this movement, but it initiated widespread acts of non-cooperation. We leave you with that. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
We don't want to do that. Alright. Because you're so cool. Come here. Because you're the coolest dog I've ever known. I love you too. You're a sweetheart. How about you come home with me? I'm ready for that.